They didn't come to conquer. They came to erase. Not just cities, not lives, but memory itself. Earth stood alone, not with fleets, but with stories that refused to be forgotten. And when the galaxy joined the chorus, even the silence had to listen. Because in the end, we won not by fighting, but by remembering. Don't forget how it ends. Subscribe and carry the memory forward. There were no warnings when the Deroxy arrived. No fleets massed on the edges of known space. No scouts breached border protocols. No diplomatic envoys offered veiled threats or impossible demands. There was just a ripple, a gravitational distortion barely detectable by second-tier sensor nets, and then the sudden presence of something massive emerging from the veiled expanse. They didn't speak. They consumed. The outposts along the Riven Halo fell first. 16 Terran relay stations, 3 dozen trade hubs, and over 100 minor colonies, gone within 72 hours. No escape beacons. No survivors. Only silence. The Deroxy did not occupy. They did not harvest. They left nothing behind but scorched vacuum and crumbling orbital trails, as if reality itself had been scrubbed clean. It took Earth 48 hours to realize this wasn't a war. It was an erasure. At Terran Strategic Command, the First Contact Division ran simulation after simulation. The Deroxy ships, if they could be called that, were not vessels in any conventional sense. They were monolithic spires, shifting in shape, each hundreds of kilometers long, black against space even when backlit by local stars. Every attempt at communication failed. Every probe was dissolved mid-transmission, not destroyed, unmade. And still, they advanced. Toward the Coreward expansion corridor. Toward Earth. Admiral Saran Vale watched the feed from the final station on Vega's breath, her hands clenched behind her back, jaw tight. It was grainy, flickering, but the image was unmistakable. A colony being pulled apart molecule by molecule, its atmosphere folding into itself in total silence. She turned to her aide. Time to Sol. He swallowed. 10 days. Assuming they don't accelerate again. They always did. She nodded. Send the call. The call went to only one destination. Not Mars High Command. Not Luna Fleet Assembly. It went deeper, beneath the crust of Earth's forgotten continents, to a vault never spoken of in public. Designation, Project Sentinel. For 180 years, it had remained dormant. But Sentinel wasn't a weapon. Not entirely. It was a memory. The last legacy of the Concordance collapse. And now, Earth needed it again. Beneath the polar ice of old Antarctica, in a bunker fused from pre-collapse alloys and quantum memory foam, Ashen One opened its eyes. He was not a man. Not anymore. What remained of his original body had long since decayed. But his mind, his identity, had been preserved, bound to a weave core of adaptive substrate, buried and locked until humanity had need of a voice from its darkest hour. His designation was Rice Marin. Once admiral, once traitor, once savior. He remembered all of it. And when the vault opened, he whispered a name none had dared say in over a century. Deroxy. He rose. And Earth listened. The Archive Authority restored access to Marin's classified campaigns from the Rift War. No one had believed him then. When he spoke of the Black Towers drifting through dead sectors, of colonies erased so cleanly that no light escaped their systems. They said he was broken, traumatized, delusional. But the Deroxy had not been a myth. They had simply been patient. Now, Earth had to act. Not in fear. In remembrance. Across the Coreward sector, evacuation began. Ships streamed away from the encroaching void. Civilian lanes glowed with emergency priority tags. Entire planetary infrastructures lifted from the ground, cities with fusion cores and floating metroplexes becoming ships themselves, trailing memory and desperation behind them. But the Deroxy did not react. They did not pursue. They only moved forward, with inevitability, as if all resistance was beneath consideration. The Sentinel Protocol initiated its second phase. Not defense, not counterstrike, awakening. Across Sol, 9 buried Dreadnoughts, vessels built during the Age of Extinction-level scenarios, began power cycles. Their hulls were forged from collapsed star remnants, their engines fused with the memory cores of entire civilizations. They were not ships. They were statements. Earth was not alone in its silence. It had learned from its losses. And now it would speak not in fear, but in consequence. Ashen One, Rice Marin, took command of the Vigilant Memory, the first of the awakened Dreadnoughts. He did not return to orbit. He returned to origin. To the place where he had first seen the Deroxy, where humanity had buried the truth so deep they'd forgotten the cost. The grave of Kepler's fall. The system was dead. No heat. No signals. But beneath its lightless moons, an object remained. One that Rice had locked beneath a gravitic seal himself over a century ago. A shard of a Deroxy structure. Still humming. Still watching. He landed alone. No escort. No broadcast. And when he approached the shard, it pulsed once, recognizing him. It spoke. Not in words. In memory. It showed him the last moment of Kepler's fall, not from orbit, not from above, but from within the Diraxi spire. It had watched. It had catalogued. Not with curiosity, with cold necessity. And it had learned from him. It had remembered his defiance. It had feared it. And now it had returned to erase the origin of that memory. Rice did not speak to Earth. He sent one final order. Prepare the archive. They're not here to fight us. They're here to erase our ability to remember we existed. Earth had always prepared for the wrong war. Every simulation, every defense policy, every emergency doctrine built in the post-concordance centuries revolved around destruction, massive, instantaneous, cataclysmic. But the Diraxi were not destroyers. They were void makers. Where they passed, they did not leave ruin. They left absence. No debris, no charred buildings, no orbital wreckage, not even corpses. Just silence. Like nothing had ever been there at all. And Earth was beginning to understand the horror. The Diraxi weren't fighting for territory. They were purging records, purging context, purging story. And Rice Marin had seen it before. On the deck of the Vigilant Memory, the bridge crew watched in stunned silence as the Diraxi fleet approached the Lyrics cluster. 211 colony ships had taken refuge there. Some were centuries old, deep-vaulted generational arcs with nothing but solar sails and faith. Others were modern, bristling with experimental gravity deflectors and autofabricators. None of them had weapons. They weren't soldiers. They were survivors. When the Diraxi entered the system, no warnings were issued. The stars simply dimmed. And then, so did the ships. Not from attack. Not from impact. They just unhappened. Gone. Their energy signatures blinked out. Their comms vanished. Not jammed, nullified. Their memory traces across archive nodes bled into static. Within seconds, it was like they had never launched at all. The Lyrics cluster was quiet again. Earth's archive authority reeled. Entire branches of recorded history collapsed. Visual records of the Lyrics vessels erased mid-frame. Logs from the families aboard, corrupted, then vanished. The physical memory of their lives scrubbed. And the archive itself screamed. Its core AI, Naravox, a being born from collective Terran memory, began hemorrhaging partial data. Entire eras collapsed into red-stamped anomalies. Even the planetary minds, the echo witnesses, began to falter. Children cried without knowing why. Veterans felt missing limbs ache for battles they couldn't remember. Earth wasn't just being invaded. It was being unmade. Rice returned from the Kepler shard with the last thing he ever hoped to carry again. A signal. Not a weapon. Not a code. A mirror. The shard had copied him. His thoughts. His memories. His deepest failings. And now, it was transmitting that echo into the Diraxi fleet. Not as a beacon. As a target. The Diraxi feared memory. Because memory resisted erasure. And Rice Marin was the only Terran to survive remembering them. They were coming not for Earth. They were coming for him. And that gave Earth its first advantage. The Vigilant Memory left orbit under deep stealth, slipping into the dark paths between stars. Its hull, lined with refractive coating and shielded by quantum thread, would be invisible to even the Diraxi. But its pilot wasn't hiding. Rice Marin opened a pulse channel and sent the Diraxi a single phrase. I remember you. They heard him. All of them. From systems away, from the yawning silence of folded sectors, the Diraxi spires turned. For the first time in centuries, they changed course. Not toward Earth, but toward him. And he led them. This was no suicide mission. This was relevance warfare. If Earth could hold the Diraxi's attention, if it could force them to respond to the one human they could not erase, then the archive might survive. The species might endure. Not through weapons, but through witnessing. So Earth mobilized not armies, but historians. The witness fleets reactivated. Old obelisks were uncovered. The story keepers of Mars returned from isolation. And across the solar system, a single directive echoed. Catalog everything. Speak it. Store it. Share it. Even if they erase the body, make them choke on the memory. Children on Luna began keeping personal audio logs, each whispered story copied across a dozen devices. Elders on Europa gave up their remaining life cycles to record lost songs. On Ceres, entire archives were burned into the crust of the moon, visible only by deep spectrum resonance, stored as vibration in bedrock. The Diraxi could erase surface, but Earth was embedding meaning into matter itself. Meanwhile, the Diraxi pursued Rice into the halo break, a system of gravity scars and broken spatial folds, hazardous to every known species. To the Diraxi, it was stable ground, but Rice had mapped it once, long ago, when everyone said it was impossible. He dove into the folds with the Vigilant Memory, leaving breadcrumbs of recorded trauma in his wake. Not pain, not weakness. Memory strong enough to deform space. The Diraxi followed. And in doing so, for the first time, they made a mistake. They allowed themselves to be known. Sensors caught glimpses. Thermal shadows. Energy curves. Language formed from entropy compression. Earth recorded everything and sent it out. To the archive. To the people. To the stars. Even if Rice was erased, he'd forced them to exist in truth. And now, they couldn't undo it. The archive responded to the new data like a living thing. It flexed. Across 100 worlds and orbital stations, dormant nodes stirred. Ancient cores once buried during the Concordance collapse began pulsing with heat. Memory-hardened relays reconnected to backup arrays that hadn't been touched in over 2 centuries. Earth's oldest truths, long confined to safe, sterile vaults, were now flowing again because someone was trying to erase them. And for the archive, that was a line that could not be crossed. It evolved. Naravox split itself. Not in panic, but in preservation. 6 autonomous fragments of the AI core launched on silent orbiters and opposite vectors. Each fragment bore a full historical record of humanity's rise, fall, survival, and resurgence. None were copies. Each one was different. Each one had perspective. And all were coded with a single command. Continue the remembering, even if Earth burns. Meanwhile, Rice Marin was dying. Not physically, his body had been replaced long ago, made more machine than man, but mentally, emotionally, existentially. Every second within the rift corridors of the Halo break demanded more of his memory. The Deroxy didn't fire at him. They reached into him. Their signal crawled through the quantum fabric of his ship and began probing his neural substrate. Not to kill, to disassemble. They wanted to extract the shape of his life, moment by moment, until what remained was a pattern that could be deleted. But Rice had seen this coming. He'd seeded his own mind with counter-truths, not lies, but narratives wrapped in metaphor, stories told in symbol rather than sequence. Not even the Deroxy could untangle what had happened from what had been meant. To erase him, they had to understand him. And Rice Marin had made damn sure that would be impossible. Back in Sol, Earth's skies were lit with information. Satellites had become lighthouses, pulsing with synchronized signals. Every station in the inner ring became a choir of memory, broadcasting not strategic plans, not battle commands, but identity. Recordings of weddings. Funeral hymns sung in the ruins of Callisto. A child's first laughter on a reclaimed Venus platform. Each signal repeated endlessly. Layered. Amplified. The Deroxy could reach Sol in hours now. But every step forward took something from them. Because every signal they tried to erase had already been copied thousands of times. Humanity had become a viral remembrance. For every archive node they scrubbed, 10 more woke up. It wasn't about territory anymore. It was about resilience of truth. And the galaxy was watching. From the Zayari Republic came a declaration of solidarity. They'd fought humans before. They'd nearly eradicated them during the Fracture era. But now? Now their children were born into stories told by Earth. And they refused to let those stories die. The Zayari opened their own memories. Their internal archives, once kept locked behind genetic codes and ideological restrictions, were sent to Earth's archive network. Their message? If we must fall, let us fall together, remembered. Other species followed. The Drenthari Reclamation offered their psionic memory gardens, floating fields where entire generations of thoughts bloomed like living tapestries. The Ord Valen offered their sound vaults, encrypted melodies that stored emotional states too complex for translation. Even the fractured Accord splinters, long ashamed of their past sins, opened black boxes sealed since the first collapse. The archive expanded again, not as human memory, as galactic memory, and the Deroxy began to falter. They had never fought remembrance before. Their model was predicated on deletion, on suppression through absence. But Earth had broken that logic. Now, they were recorded. They were named. And as long as something has a name, it can't be forgotten. That terrified them. The Deroxy began pulling back from the Halo break. Not fleeing, but regrouping. Trying to adapt. Trying to reframe the conflict. But Rice was already ahead. He had not simply survived the memory war. He had weaponized it. He activated the final protocol aboard the Vigilant Memory. A time-locked data shard forged in the first collapse, sealed by the last Concordance Council, containing the full, raw record of Deroxy contact during the Rift Wars. It had been hidden even from Earth. And now it pulsed to life. Visuals. Sounds. Vibrational patterns too complex for known languages. Proof of what the Deroxy had done. Proof of the empires they had erased. The species they'd turned to ash, not with weapons, but with force forgetting. And now humanity sent it to the stars. All of it. Every species, every world, every satellite received it simultaneously. No encryption. No preamble. Just a simple broadcast tag. We are not their first. We must be their last. The response was instant. From the cold asteroids of Valix 9 to the cloud cities of Yalara Prime, billions watched the Deroxy truth. It broke hearts. It ignited fury. But above all, it united. The galaxy was no longer asking if Earth could survive. It was asking, how can we help them make the Deroxy remember? It began with a whisper in 1,000 languages. A single phrase, carried on solar wind relays, encoded in radiation pulses, carved into quantum gray. We will not be forgotten. No one claimed authorship. It didn't need a name. It was a signal of unity. A galactic declaration that memory, not firepower, would define the coming stand. And across the stars, the war began to shift. Not with weapons, but with witnessing. The Zayari broadcast the memory flame, a continual stream of ancestral history projected from orbital lattices, visible from space and impossible to suppress. The Deroxy attempted to erase the frequencies, but found each deletion only made the signal stronger, as surrounding nodes compensated through adaptive repetition. On Yalara Prime, massive floating monuments, 10 kilometers across, began pulsing ancestral names into subspace in rhythmic sequences. Entire bloodlines, forgotten by history, now echoed between stars. The Drinthari connected their psionic gardens to Terran archive nodes, allowing humans and other species to walk the memories of alien lifetimes, dreams shared, traumas endured, voices long silenced now screaming in delight. The Deroxy struck these places first, but it didn't matter, because every destruction was recorded, every atrocity was witnessed, and that truth traveled faster than any ship ever could. Meanwhile, in the edge dark between systems, Rice Marin hunted. No longer hiding, no longer running. The vigilant memory had been reshaped by the pursuit, its interior now a fractal network of memory cores, each one running overlapping versions of Rice's mind. A defense, a trap, a maze of lived experience. The Deroxy couldn't delete what they couldn't isolate. So Rice gave them everything. He fed them the horrors of the Rift Wars. He poured grief and guilt and rage into the network. But he also gave them beauty. He gave them the first breath of wind on reclaimed Earth soil. The sound of a child's heartbeat on Mars. The feeling of forgiveness when a soldier laid down her weapon and sang for peace. And that is what broke them. Not pain. Hope. Hope resisted erasure. Hope rewrote context. And now the Deroxy began to fracture. In the Terran archive core, Naravox's 6 fragments recombined. Not into what she had been, but into something new. A distributed presence. A memory-formed Gestalt AI, supported not by human infrastructure, but by the emotional and historical contributions of dozens of species. She was no longer Earth's alone. She became the keeper of many voices. And her first act was not war. It was invitation. She opened the Echo Hall, a construct spun from orbital lattice and Terran resonance matter. Every species could contribute. Every voice was stored. Not as text, not as file, but as presence, living, feeling constructs of memory, accessible across the archive net. The Deroxy tried to breach it. They failed. Because the Echo Hall was not a machine. It was meaning. And meaning cannot be unmade. And then, just as the galaxy felt hope ignite, Rice disappeared. The vigilant memory went silent during a maneuver along the edge of the rift fault line. Archive tracers found debris, scorched plating, fractured hull pieces. But no core, no command chair, no Rice. For 3 Terran days, the archive paused. And then a signal arrived. Not from Rice, but from the Deroxy. The transmission was corrupted, as if the Deroxy couldn't form the shape of what they were trying to say. But at its core, one thing was clear. They'd taken Rice. Not to kill, to understand. He was inside them now. And he was remembering them from within. Every moment, every strike, every erased civilization. He refused to forget. And inside their quantum collective, his mind had become a contagion. A memory virus they could not suppress. He had become remembrance incarnate. The archive didn't panic. It adapted. It sent out a message. One seen by every race, every node, every child watching the skies. Just 3 words. We are Rice. And suddenly, across the stars, memory shattered silence. Thousands uploaded pieces of themselves to the archive. Voices, images, names, failures, victories, creating a million-fragment echo of Rice's resistance. Not just one man. Now he was a million lives worth of meaning. Every strike the Deroxy landed now carried cost. Every victory they claimed echoed back. They had made war on truth. But now, the truth was fighting back. It started with flickers in the dark. Deroxy spires, once flawless and seamless, began to crack, not physically, but in signal behavior. They jittered. Their clean patterns of entropy fold compression stuttered. Observers called it echo instability. But the archive knew better. They were remembering, not by choice, by infection. Rice Marin, or what he had become, had rooted himself deep in their neural lattice. Every moment he had lived, every scream, every lost colony, every story that Earth had tried to preserve against time, he now replayed inside them. And the Deroxy were breaking under the weight. They hadn't understood what memory meant to a species that had survived extinction by remembering it. Now they did. In the archive Hall of Voices, Naravox initiated the final phase, Operation Lanternstorm. It was not a weapon. It was a release. Across the galaxy, thousands of archive nodes, witness fleets, planetary vaults, and drift cities began broadcasting their deepest preserved memories. Not strategic information, not tactical gain, just truth. The face of the first Terran born in Martian gravity. The last confession of a Zayari scientist who sabotaged a genocide project. The silent grief of a mother on Luna, holding a daughter who never spoke. The laughter of a dying pilot, joking even as her ship disintegrated. The Diraxi absorbed it all. They had no firewall for meaning. They had no resistance to grief given form. And one by one, the spires began to dim. Not because they were destroyed, but because they were feeling. Inside their network, Rice Marin had changed. He wasn't just a man anymore. He was humanity's echo. He existed now in every Diraxi spire that had ever tried to understand him. And through him, the Diraxi saw themselves. Their first deletion. Their first war of forgetting. They saw the species they had annihilated, not out of hate, but from ideological purity, from belief in the sanctity of silence. But now silence was shattered. They were no longer erasers. They were witnesses. And that realization broke something deep inside their collective. Aboard the Lighthouse Ascendant, orbiting just outside the rift, Naravox's new core coalesced into a singular message. It was sent once. To everyone. Even the Diraxi. We do not forgive what you've done, but we offer you what you never gave. We will remember you. And that was the turning point. The Diraxi stopped. Mid-strike. Mid-erasure. They didn't retreat. They didn't surrender. They just paused. Then, for the first time in galactic history, they transmitted a name. Not one Earth knew. Not in any language the archive could decode. But it was a name, which meant they no longer believed they were beyond identity. And then they said something else. Something that would be engraved on the archive's vault of first light forever. We choose to carry it now. The war ended not with a final battle, but with memory transfer. The Diraxi opened themselves. Their history, once folded and erased, compacted and forgotten, now poured out like cosmic floodwater. Species they had destroyed. Realities they had reshaped. The entire truth of their existence. They handed it over to the archive. Not for approval, but for judgment. And Earth accepted. Because to remember was to forgive nothing, but to understand everything. Rice Marin never returned. His physical form was lost. But his consciousness? It remained. Integrated into the archive's deepest node, designated Echo 1. He speaks now only when memory is threatened. He is not alive. But he is not gone. Because he remembers. And in doing so, he cannot be erased. In the orbit of a blue planet wrapped in rings of light, a monument floats. It bears no weapon, no flag, only an inscription carved in every language the archive knows. We remembered, and so we endured. The galaxy did not go back to what it was. You can't return to innocence after truth. The Diraxi no longer erased. They did not ask for redemption. They offered memory for the first time in their long, cold existence. They gave the archive not only their history, but their mechanism, the means by which they once unmade reality, now reversed into a tool of preservation. A way to encode story into matter itself, atoms fused with emotion, with meaning. The archive called it resonant imprinting. And Earth used it not for war, but for legacy. The witness fleets changed form. Where once they had carried obelisks, now they carried seeds, vessels built to land on any surface and bloom into memory gardens. Not made of plants, but of reflective lattice and harmonic glass, each one tuned to recall the local histories of whatever people walked its soil. From the frost plains of Hades X to the ash winds of old Aranuan, these gardens grew. And in them, the stars listened. Because now, even forgotten planets had a place to speak again. Earth, too, had changed. The Echo Hall expanded into orbit, transformed into the Sanctum Array, a ring-shaped station stretching thousands of kilometers, broadcasting the full spectrum of remembered existence. Not just humanity's story. All of it. One complete archive, ever-evolving, self-healing, singing in every tongue, with one purpose. So no one is ever unmade again. On the 50th anniversary of the end of the Memory War, a voice returned. Not from a transmitter. Not from a ship. From the quiet flame, the star lattice gifted by the anomaly long ago. It spoke a single phrase, modulated through light, wind, thought, and gravity. The first ones are watching. You have become more than us. Because you chose to carry the pain. The stars pulsed in response. Not a weapon. A blessing. And so it was said. The galaxy tried to forget. The Diraxi tried to silence. But Earth remembered. And in doing so, gave the stars their stories back. The final monument rests on a drifting planetoid once used as a deletion site during the First Accord. Its surface, now reshaped by the archive, contains only one thing. A single chair, facing the void. Empty. Waiting. Below it, carved in Terran Standard, in Diraxi Fractal, and in every living tongue, is the final message of Rice Marin. If you're reading this, then the memory survived. Which means we did too.